Hello YouTube, it's Ryan here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we are doing another first impressions review. However, today we're going to be doing it over a manhwa. Today we're going to be looking at Solo Leveling Volume 1. Now technically, I already know what happens in this story. I've been reading the light novels for the last year or so. However, I thought the reading experience was different enough to warrant a separate video. So Solo Leveling Volume 1 is written by Chugong and illustrated by Dubu, and in parentheses it said Redice Studios, so I'm guessing that this is a group of people that drew this. As you guys can see right there, and they did a pretty good job, so I'm really happy with that. The publisher here is Yen Press, as you guys can see right there. Here's what the volume looks like on the outside. Here's what the pages look like. All of these pages are in color, so when there's a dark situation, the backgrounds are also in black, and so that's why you have so many pages that look like that. It's not really a flashback like in Japanese volumes, it's just kind of like something that's happening in a dark environment. So that's what it is. And this is a action fantasy game lit RPG type story. It's not an isekai, although it has a lot of elements that most manga readers or light novel readers will associate with isekai. It is more in line with a gamer type story. It has game lit elements, which means it has levels, and it has title screens, and it has all of these types of things that are very video game-esque. However, they're happening in the real world most of the time. He also is kind of a dungeon explorer, so he goes into portals and they fight things. So it's a kind of a spelunking manga, I guess you can call it. And I didn't mention the demographic here because I don't know what it is. I would say it's an adult demographic, and here it says older teen, but like there's nothing here that's like particularly worse than anything that happens in a shonen magazine or in a shonen manga. But I guess the character is an older character. He's about 20-something years old, 22. And also, there's a lot more gore, but it's not really like super visually like unsettling or anything like that. So, I don't know. And in terms of adaptation, this is the adaptation of the novel. The novel has 14 volumes, and the light novel, or the manga should have 179 chapters. And so far, it looks like every book has about 2.5 chapters. So it's kind of weird. And the way it's set up is kind of odd, but it works, I guess. The premise here is basically that there's this guy who happens to be the weakest hunter in the world. He's E rank, and he's also the lowest E ranker ever, which sucks. He basically goes into a dungeon and immediately gets hurt because everything is stronger than him. He happens to go on this hunt one more time. He's there with some older characters that he knows that he's hunted with before, and a friend of his that's a healer whose name is Yohi, and they go in and stuff goes awry. This happens to be a dungeon that has another dungeon within it. They go into that, and then stuff happens and he dies. However, right before he dies, a screen appears and it says, "You have met the requirements to become a player. Do you accept?" He clicks yes, and suddenly he wakes up and has realized that he has the ability to level up, an ability that no one else in the world except him has. So that's why it's called solo leveling. And now he's leveling himself up and trying to gain power in order to never be weak again, and in order to make money that he needs in order to save his mother from this disease that is ravaging her, and that is what's it called? Like the reason he needs money in the first place. So that's basically all there is to it. And then we kind of develop the character more in the following volumes here, but in general, that's more or less what this is. So, how do you go about this? Do you read the light novel or do you read the manga? The light novel is the original source material, so it is actually maybe better to read that if you want that. However, I will say one thing. The art here is awesome. It's amazing. It's very, very good. It's creepy when it needs to be. It's very empathetic and kind of like what's it called? Like emotion creating when it needs to be. And overall, it's just really enjoyable to just see and look at. The colors are very nice and vibrant. The backgrounds are great. It's actually not that hard to read. This is supposed to usually be read on a phone or a tablet, and you're supposed to scroll up instead of like flip pages. So they did a really great job of organizing the all of the panels correctly in a way that makes it really easy to read. So it's not that difficult at all, even though this is not the correct format for this book. However, sometimes it does happen that you're confused because in a manga the flow of panels would go one way, and in this case it doesn't really work the same way. So sometimes you kind of get lost and you just have to reread the page in a different order, and you kind of, get over that issue. So how do we kind of talk about this in terms of how it compares to the light novel? First of all, this covers the first 80 pages of the light novel and a little bit of the next chapter in the light novel, which would be 80 to 120 pages, like a 40-page chapter. It covers a tiny bit of that, and it covers the first 80 pages of the book, which are the first 3 chapters and a bit, which is pretty good. I mean, for a manga that has 300 and something pages, 3.5 chapters, almost half of the novel is actually not that bad. It's pretty good. However, I didn't like one aspect of this, and it's that it finishes halfway through a chapter. This is supposed to contain 3 chapters here. It says, prologue, which is only about 8 pages, and it's a prologue that's different from the light novel, so that's kind of interesting. I think the prologue that they chose for this is actually better because it is more intriguing than the one in the light novel, but that's neither here nor there. But as you can see, there's supposed to be the prologue, which is 8 pages, and then 3 chapters. However, you get through chapter 3, and you realize that, hey, this is only half of the chapter. This chapter hasn't finished. So where the heck is the rest of it? It's in the next volume. I think that's really weird. I really don't like that. It doesn't really make much of a difference in terms of reading. You just kind of stop and continue the chapter later. But it is just kind of odd that, they did that. Why wouldn't they just have 3 chapters per book properly? It doesn't really make a difference. I think it was just a choice in order to balance out the amount of volumes or something like that. But I don't like it. I thought it was kind of weird to just stop in the middle of a chapter. I think that's just a really odd decision, but it doesn't end up mattering all that much. It's just kind of odd. So, which one should you buy? Should you buy the manga or the light novel? I'm going to buy both, personally, but if you can only afford one, I think the light novel is better because it is more affordable. I've read the second volume of this, and that hasn't finished covering the first volume, or has only just managed to cover the first volume of the light novel. So if you're going to pay $40 for the same content that's in a $15 volume of the light novel, I think the light novel is a more affordable buy. However, if you don't really like reading and you really want images, I think the light novel, the Manhwa is better, but only just. The art style is great, but the price point is pretty high for something that is actually not that much in terms of story. Like, it has not much happens in one of these volumes per volume, right? $20 is actually pretty good because all of these pages are in color. They have a satinized kind of finish, so they're not like regular paper. They're actually like comic book paper. So they're kind of very high quality. There's a very nice heft to it. So I think that $20 is a good price point. I'm just saying that economically, like, the best way to go about reading the story and enjoying the story is definitely the light novel, because it is so much more affordable and it has so much more story in it, right? However, maybe you can argue that that's not the case, because a lot of the stuff that happens in the light novel is completely glossed over in this, because a lot of it is just grinding and just listening to Jinwoo just think and talk about what he's killing and why he's killing them and what he's kind of feeling in the moment, which I think adds a lot of character. But this kind of story decides that it's not necessary and just keeps it because they can show you visual, representations of what's happening, and you can kind of more or less understand the same thing. So it really is up to you as an individual. I personally would go with the light novel, but happily and very, luckily, I'm able to afford both, and I'm gonna go ahead and buy both as I go along. So that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you had the choice, which one would you pick? Do you think the art style warrants the higher price point for less content, or do you think that the light novel is still better because it's a source material and because it is a lot more affordable? Let me know down in the comments, and thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.